I spoke in Irish because most of the people that are mentioned in the books that Gerard has been researching had Irish as their first language in their own homes. Their parents spoke Irish, and very often the parents told them, forget Irish. English is what you speak. It's the language of commerce. It's the language of the courts. It's the language of immigration. And I think that we should, at all times, think of our own native language. And that's why I started with Irish. Of the many publications relating to Donaghmore and its history, I wish to select just a few. Donaghmore and All Around deals with all those who found their last resting place in the graveyards here in the village and in Donaghmore Cross. That book is a wealth of local history, genealogy, and it outlines the lives of many of the people that are named on the headstones. The Bridges of Donaghmore is the second book that I would like to highlight. A masterpiece of research on a topographical subject on the bridges of the parish. 71 bridges over 340 stunning images of bridges and landscape. That book also charts social history from the 1600s to the famine. Unfortunately, Gerald Ford, who did all the research on that, was ready to publish and promulgate his book during COVID. But I just want to draw to your attention that that book is a masterpiece on topographical history, on geography, and so on. Now, I have my notes, of course, and they're scattered in all different places, which is a good idea. Now, I want to talk about Gerard and his books. Gerard, as a student in second level, did not have the option of studying history. But his enthusiasm for history shined through in other classes. So much so that one of his teachers said to him, "I will direct you, guide you, help you in your history studies." Little did that teacher know that Gerard would be responsible for quite a substantial number of articles. I suppose the one major work that he did early on was the history of the GAA, of the Donaghmore GAA. An invaluable book again of social history, of living conditions, and of the games that were played. Moving on from that, he wrote introductions to the opening of the Condon Memorial Field here, and also the Owen McCarthy Corey Field in Lochabaw. His next major work was Ancient Sweet Donaghmore, going back into the depths of time and coming forward through the history and outlining and detailing an exhaustive research and history of the Douglas of Donaghmore. I really think that the publication tonight and the launch of the book completes a circle. I wonder how many parishes in County Cork or even in Ireland have such a selection of books dealing with social history, dealing with GAA games, topographical subjects like the bridges and the landscape. Again, I just state that it is a circle as far as I would think. Now, should I talk? Lord Mayor is almost here. Should we just pause a little? Yes. So if we're pausing a little then, Gerard Ford is down there on the floor over there. I hope he's somewhere anyway. And he's going to just interview a number of people that will So we're at the stage now where Gerard Ford is somewhere down there in the building, and he's going to interview some people on the common. Thank you, Gerard.
Thank you, John. We are honoured and privileged here tonight by the presence of several people with very direct connections to those to whom everyone here is indebted back in the revolutionary period of our parish's history. None were more important than Sheila and Nora Wallace from Donaghmore, who were front and centre of the intelligence operations in Cork. Bernadette Wallace is a niece of Sheila and Nora. The two sisters had a very deep and spiritual relationship with their faith, and in the book, Gerard has a picture of the Christmas crib from the shop back in the day. So I'd like to welcome Bernadette and ask her, could you enlighten us a little about the religious aspect of their personalities, please?
The shop was opened around 1910, and they said an opportunity burst forth, rich and majestic like the flower of the aloe vera. When they opened the shop, they said, we won't wait another century. Circumstances has moulded us. Now we mould circumstances. Ireland must be free. Humanity must be free. Next to God, their friends and their country, they had a love so passionate. And there are chats about exchanging gossip in the back kitchen of Wallace's shop, but I decided to go to the front window. As you entered the shop, you had the lovely coloured rosary beads. As they said, a bead that adorned many's a holy well. And then we had the May altar. They just made that beautiful May altar with flaunty Mayflowers, white lilies, bundles of primroses around the candles, and then dotted here and there, symbolical of the lily of Israel, and filling the shop with their delicate perfume was lilies of the valley. And then we came to the Christmas, to the Corpus Christi feast, where the door was just covered with green foliage. And the window, the centre of the window was adorned with icons of the Sacred Heart, beautiful statues of Our Lady of Lourdes, crucifixes without number, and they remained for the whole month of June. And then we had Christmas. And of course, the shop was beautifully decorated with holly and ivy. The crib was actually in the centre of the window, and people just came and visited. They felt as if they were part of the Holy Family. And then, of course, the Brian O'Higgins Christmas cards, they occupied a prominent shelf so that no customer could miss it. So that was more of the decorations of the shop. And, because it had a very good clientele who visited, and there were men coming at different hours of the day and the night. So therefore the military became a bit suspicious, so they had the frequent raids. And then there was this gentleman, he was supposed to be a lodger, and he stayed very quiet, he never spoke, and he was very interested in the Cork Examiner. So should a military officer have the odd glass of paper, he discovered it was upside down. So they just thought he was illiterate, so they just left him. So those are just some of the decorations of the shop.
Thank you very much, Bernadette, for those personal recollections. Now, Ted Murphy is a great-grandnephew of Sheila and Nora. The British Civil Service and military in Cork had a great many people employed in the tax offices, customs, post office, as well as huge numbers in the army at Victoria Barracks in Ballincollig. Ted, you have vivid memories of what went on in the headquarters of Cork No. 1 Brigade at Wallace's shop.
Okay, I'm going to take you on a little tour. Imagine this is St. Augustine Street, Brunswick Street they called it, number 3, number 5. They had the shop, which is like this here. The front door is over here. People come out from Mass on a Sunday straight in. Even when I was there on the Sunday, they'd come in for the newspapers, and that's where the few bob to pay the rent was made. The front door was here. The door swung in. It was very big. A big bulb hung in the centre, wooden floor. Here was a window with all the things. Now, when we got it, there was nothing. It was just a red cloth, if you like, aged. And on the other side here, if you see the old pictures of the shop, there's another door that led up to the 2 bedrooms on top with the skylight, which was one escape area. There was 2 girls, and there was the sister. One of them, Hannah, may have come, or John may have come. They paid 3, but they had a lodger, because if the Brits they were passing every night at curfew, 10 of them, 12 of them, with their lieutenants, and if somebody wanted to go in and out, they could see, oh, he's only a lodger. In here was the shop floor. Over here was glass case. Behind was the partition where all the action took on. Tom Barry came in, James Connolly came in before he was killed 3 months later, 4 months at Easter. He came in January. Tom Crofts, Ty Barry, Terence McSweeney, Thomas McCurtain. You start the list. Sean Russell, Liam Russell, I should say, Carol O'Shanahan. Endless. We probably could find more. Or probably the guy, as I always say, he didn't come down from Dublin on the bicycle, so he stayed put. He didn't come during the War of Independence. Michael Collins. A toilet out the back, a cooker, we had it, and a fireplace. And that was the shop of little secrets. Thank you.
What wonderful recollections. Thank you very much, Ted. Now I'm delighted to introduce a famous native of the parish of Dunamore. Bob Honehan, whose grandfather, John William Honehan, was heavily involved in the Land League. Bob himself was an unequalled Cork GA, has an unequalled Cork GA record of divisional, county, provincial and All-Ireland success, particularly with 6 under-21 All-Ireland football championships as coach and the 2 football All-Irelands as selector in 1989 and 1990, the centenary year for Cork. Bob, it's an important achievement for the parish with the publication of this book by Gerard.
I'm going to sit down. I'm embarrassed with that introduction. But I think I could say confidently that no other parish in the county of Cork, or perhaps far beyond, has its history as well researched and recorded as the parish of Dunamore. And this is due to a few generous individual people who are generous with their time, because a lot of work went into researching and writing these books. I have to mention a few besides where we are in Gerard, particularly tonight. I have to mention a few others as well. And I suppose the ball started rolling with Father John Murphy, who was in Dunamore in the early 50s. And he has written, it has never been published, which is unfortunate, on prehistoric Dunamore. John O'Connell, who's our MC tonight, John is a well-known historian. And I'm sure he got great satisfaction in seeing his account of the impact which the famine had on the tenant farmers of Buckler and Bonaventure, included in the atlas of the great Irish famine. This book is considered to be the ultimate in the history of the famine. Also, we have to remember the people who took part, who organised and contributed to the Historical and Writers Association. And I think I'd have to mention Liam Healan, because I saw he was manager of that group, and he also wrote some fine articles. But we have to admit, I think everybody, that all the combined efforts are dwarfed by the work done by Gerald O'Rourke. His contribution to writing the history of his native parish is simply immense. Many would be aware, perhaps, of the painstaking and time-consuming job it is collecting the information and then putting it together. And first he gave us the history of the GA in Donaghmore. And it was more than the history of the GA, because he also reminded us of one of the great days of the year in Donaghmore when I was growing up, and others here. And that was the sports day, or the Donaghmore sports were well known all over the country and attracted the best athletes, the best cyclists from all over the country. And I remember doing an interview with Sean Moore, the great Cork footballer. A lot of people here would never have heard of him, but he played midfield in the Oilers of 56 and 57. But early in 50, he was a great athlete as well. Early in 58, he got injured on a motorbike accident. And he was telling me, and sincerely, he didn't know I was a Donaghmore man. He said he wasn't so much interested, so much disappointed at not being able to play with Cork that next year, but he was afraid that he wouldn't make the Donaghmore sports. Such was the esteem in which they were held. Now, Gerald has put, I have to mention, of course, Jerry Ford. Jerry's own book, the book Bridges of Donaghmore. It's a beautiful publication, very well, excellently written, and it's not simply a history of the rivers and the bridges of Donaghmore, because in that book also is contained what we could say was practically the history of rural Ireland during those decades. I have one quote to plug with Jerry. As I went to school every morning to Tulling, I passed over a bridge and I thought I was crossing the Driftsea River. But I see with Gerald's book, it's only attributed to the Driftsea and it's actually named the North Kilmurray River. And I would also have a footnote with him, jocosely, if it was to be called other than the Driftsea River, it should be called the Derry River, because it divides the parish of Donaghmore and Avalon, the townland of Derry and the townland of Tullinmore. But Gerald was a really excellent book. I got great pleasure in reading it, and I learned an awful lot from it. But as I said, Gerald O'Rourke stands head and shoulders above all others. How people don't realise, the time and effort that must have gone first into researching and collecting information together, but he put it so well, beautifully together. Following his history of the GA, he then produced the Ancient Sweet Donaghmore, a book on which John A. Murphy, Professor of History at UCC, lavished the highest of praise, and a praise that was richly deserved. And now he's bringing the history of Donaghmore up to modern times. I have had a chance to read a few chapters of this book, and I can say it's up to the standard of all the others and will make for compelling reading. And I think I wouldn't be amiss in saying that I would, in offering my own congratulations to him, I would be congratulating him on behalf of all the people of Donaghmore for the wonderful service and the wonderful legacy he has left to future generations. So, Gerald, you should be very proud, very, very proud of what you've done, what you've achieved. Your parents would be very proud of you, and I know one woman who would be especially proud of you. A woman that was very important to me when I was growing up, your grandmother, which we knew, Nora Driscoll, which we knew as Noan Sean, a wonderful lady that was, and she would be very pleased to think that you had achieved all these achievements, and that you were placed in history, that the history of Donaghmore is secured forever. So my own thanks. We owe you a debt of gratitude. It can never be properly repaid. But it was love of your own parish who inspired the work which you did. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Bob. Now we'll take a little break and change over to the recitation of a poem by John Murphy, great-grandnephew of Jim Barrett. The poem, Jim Barrett, True and Brave.
We can't credit the author of this poem because we don't know who does it, so if anyone does know, please leave us know afterwards. But the winds of March made music soft around that virgin grave, where rests today beneath the clay Jim Barrett, true and brave. That noble son of Inishvale, a soldier brave was he. He proudly gave his life that day to set old Ireland free. He heard the call of motherland and straightway obeyed, continued not for better cause, or tarried or delayed. In Dripsy's field were fighting hard for his dear dark Rosalie. He wounded fell beneath the flag, the yellow, white and green. Today he sleeps his long last sleep beneath the emerald sod. His soul has found a happier home high in the halo of God. All through the years that yet will come, his memory will remain as one who gave his life to free this one bright spot again. His comrades dear that loved him well, his friends from Dunamore, alas won't see his kindly face and gleaming smile no more. But his name will shine on history's pages with lads as brave and true that fought beside him in that fight and died for Ireland too.
Thank you, John. That was very moving. We now return to the stage and back to you, John.
I got a bit confused in the order of events, but I'd like now to call on Michael Looney, Councillor Michael Looney, who's representing the County Cork Mayor, to say the words.
One, two, yes. Gahirlock, Lord Mayor of Cork City, Councillor Kieran McCarthy, Gerard Rourke, Muinta Donachmore, Agus, Duine Galea. It gives me great pleasure to be here tonight as a Dunamoreman myself to, I suppose, witness Gerard's contribution to history again tonight. He has been foremost at the past 5, 10, 15 years. He's written books and books and books, but I think what he has, this book that I've seen tonight, I think some professors would have another look before they take it on. A real credit to him. George has gone through a hard period with the past 12 months, so this is great tonight, and I'm sure this will lift him completely. Now, he's written about everything that happens in the parish, and he's a credit to the parish, and they're proud of him. And history is something that if it isn't recorded, it could be lost. So the real substance of this is written down and is there for life. I suppose Dunamore is full of historians. Gerard has written a gram. George Ford has done a beautiful thing on the bridges of Dunamore, which I didn't think there was 70-something of them there, but they're absolutely illustrated and a credit to him. But tonight belongs, there's no question about, to George Rourke and his huge contribution to history, his huge contribution to Dunamore, and I wish him the very, very best of luck in his book. Guramila Mahagav Galia.
All this technology around my head. I'd now like to call on the Lord Mayor of Cork, Councillor McCarthy, to say a few words. He has been elected on 3 occasions, and Lord Mayor, current Lord Mayor, is
County Mayor Michael Looney, dear Gerard, and Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for the invitation out to this very, very beautiful Donaghmore here this evening. And on page 2 of Gerard's book, there's a poem, and it reads, it's just called Sweet Donaghmore, and it says, the first verse is, when the summer sun is setting over the distant mountain brown, and when the evening wanes to twilight, and the shades of night come down, and with starry roofs above you, with meadow sprangled floor, it's sweet to roam through the glen and break around sweet Donaghmore. That's the first verse of a collection of songs and poems by Ben O'Hickey, who was originally from Bansham but found himself during the War of Independence in Donaghmore. My dear friends, I perhaps have 3 reflections that I'd like to make, and all kind of in the vein of celebrating Gerard's work. And Gerard, can I first of all say thank you so much for this, because I know that you have financed this more or less yourself. You have your own publishing company, so thank you for being you on behalf of probably the community here. So let's give Gerard a round of applause. Friends, they say that stories, and I collect stories, and I know there's other guardians of the past in this audience is what I can see as well, collect stories, but some stories can impress you. Some stories can disturb you. Some stories can make you curious. Some stories can kind of bring you on a journey to some place. Some stories can make you explore. Some stories can make you remember. And then there are some stories that can just make you forget. So the interesting thing about stories is that connected to stories are just emotions. And within this book, within Gerard's book, all of those emotions are also present. There are stories within the book that will impress you. For example, like the depth of Gerard's kind of storytelling. My dear friends, this book probably has the bones of over 100,000 words on Donaghmore. The depth of the storytelling, this is really, really, really incredible. You'd have to travel far and wide now. You'd have to travel very, very far to find a book like this sort of detail. I mean, and this is kind of, I know Gerard has been writing in Donaghmore for many, many, many years, but this is his kind of second big tome on Donaghmore. And the interesting thing is that Donaghmore isn't a big place. Like, it's not Cork City, but there have been people here who have been speaking just before us that there have been many people that have been kind of writing about Donaghmore and have fallen in love with this place and kind of fallen maybe deeper in love than perhaps many, many, many people in the parish and have taken the time out to write it up. But this book is very impressive. This book, within some of the stories, is also disturbing. Like when you read about the War of Independence, when you read about the people who lost their lives, very, very disturbing when you kind of read about the Irish Civil War and people who knew each other in the parish and they're fighting with each other and kind of, I think there's a chapter about kind of brothers kind of facing off against each other, or comrades kind of facing off against each other. That's kind of very, very disturbing, and I think lots of us in the last kind of few years were commemorating the Civil War and been trying to get our heads around kind of like, how did they do this and why did this actually happen? And it's interesting, within the book, that kind of disturbing emotion is kind of explored. The curiosity element for me within this book is very much, I love the whole idea of the focus on daily life. Finbar and I in the car on the way out, we decided to take the old Butter Road out from Tower because I haven't travelled it in kind of many years. And within this book, there's kind of nods to the Butter Road, there's nods to the dairy farming in the area, there's nods to the horse and carts of kind of time goes by, and you start looking at the pictures and kind of going, I wonder who that person is. And I wonder whose grandfather that is, or whose great-grandfather that is, or some people you might kind of go, I actually do know that person in the book because I've been living in the parish kind of for all my life. And so there's some really, really, really great images in this book. My dear friends, for many, many people, history is a very personal perspective. Like that all of us go home, and we do talk about history every day, but we kind of say, remember what my grandmother said, remember what your grandfather said, or uncle, or Auntie Mary and your Uncle John said. We do talk about history kind of every single day at our own dinner table. Some stories in this particular book, they make you remember. I mean, there's different sections about remembrance and memorials and some of the rooms even within Dunamore and the Stoke area as well. And there's very much a call within this book to explore, that you take this book out into the countryside and explore it and get lost in it. We're very, very blessed in County Cork that you can go down roads that sometimes physically lead nowhere, and you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting, just back up the road again. There's plenty of roads like this around Dunamore that kind of want you to explore. And so very much one of my calls is to take this book out into the field physically and kind of visit some of the sites. So very much my first reflection is how lucky that we have someone like Gerard to put together something that is about stories and emotions and celebrates stories and emotions, because we all need stories and emotions in our lives and to make us kind of feel a little bit more human. And also, like, stories also create a sense of identity and a sense of place. And long may you have a strong sense of place in Dunamore, because I can feel it in the room. Like, I don't know, there's probably 80, 90, 100 people in this room that have turned out for this book that's celebrating life 100 years ago. And long may you have that celebration of life and society within Dunamore. My second brief reflection, my dear friends, is probably kind of zoning in on what Gerard has tried to do as well. Within this book, there's meticulous detail, and there's also really interesting methodologies. So those of us who are involved in the local history trade, what Gerard has done is that he's kind of mined down into letters, he's mined down into objects, he's mined down into memories, he's mined down into the memories of family members. He's kind of drew on what I call nostalgic currency. Kind of nostalgia that's kind of passed down from generation to generation, and he's kind of wove that together, wove those stories and that kind of nostalgia into the book. And he's certainly within this book shown the importance of archives, newspapers, and also that there's a lot much more to be researched. Like, when you think of, there is a chapter in this book on Mrs. Lindsay, on the Wallace sisters, and Major Compton Smith, on the kind of the different IRA battalions in this particular part of the world. But there's so much more to research. I think when you read some of Gerard's chapters, you can get the sense that he's only scratching the surface. And so perhaps there is a call within Gerard's book that we need to do more. We need to do more research. We need to reach out more and see what's in people's attics. My dear friends, a few years ago, I was doing some work on Inniscarra Dam. And I was called to a house somewhere in the city, in the southern suburbs, and I met the concrete scientist from the 1950s. And he was an older gentleman. He was in his 80s when I met him about 10 years ago. He's passed away since. And I said to this concrete scientist, now it's not easy to make a dam stand, like for we'd say over 50 years when I was looking at the dam over 10 years ago. And I said to him, like, have you any stuff that you've kept, or any diaries or any pictures? And he said no. And then his wife turned around in the kitchen and the wife said to him, like, well, what's all the stuff in the attic, so? And the wife went up to the attic and brought down a whole box of graphs and charts and all the graphs associated with creating the concrete and the science of concrete for Inniscarra Dam. Put it all down the table in front of me, and there was all his notebooks. So my dear friends, I think the point I'm trying to make is there's a lot more out there. And maybe my call to you this evening is that go home and have a look at your attic, or perhaps the photographs that are on your wall, and maybe try to bring some of those to Gerard for the next book that he might be working on, because I have no doubt that he's probably working on something else. So, but the methodology, it's also a labour of love. It really is for Gerard and others who are what I call guardians of the past. We are very, very blessed, I can tell you, in this area, jumping down to Inniscarra, Dripsey, down into the Riverlea catchment area. My dear friends, we probably have the bones of 25 to 30 local historians. You've actually mapped them out. If you actually sat down and went parish by parish, which I did a few years ago, and at any event like this, I always say to the local historians like Gerard, thank you so much for being the guardian, for collecting the information, and being someone that people can go to and kind of find out even more information. So my second message is very much about, there's a lot more to research, and please help Gerard in his research as well, and others who are in this room as well, researching different things. My third thing that I want to say, my dear friends, is that I wear an object that's actually really, really old. This is a gold chain. It's a Lord Mayor's chain. It's the fourth known chain in Cork City's history over 1,000 years. On the back of this chain, it says this chain was created in 1787. It's 237 years old. you can imagine what this chain has seen. I'd love to kind of say to press play, and all of a sudden it tells you all the stories and all the emotions of the stories. But we don't have that. It's passed from one Lord Mayor to another. In a month's time, I pass this on to kind of the next kind of guardian as such. But on the front of the chain, it shows the city's coat of arms, the two towers and the ship in between. And there's a Latin inscription, Statio Bene Fide Carinis, which translated means a safe harbour for ships. And we know lots about King's Castle and Queen's Castle. We know nothing about the ship. It's just a three-masted ship in kind of full sail. But you can draw kind of analogies, you can kind of reinterpret this kind of any which way you want. Like the safe harbour for ships, you could say like that Cork, County of Cork, is a safe harbour for people. If you have ships, you've got people, you've got sailors, you've got people working the ships. And I do deem Dunamore, with all your love of Dunamore that's in this particular room, as a safe harbour for people, and long may you have that. And I also, I deem that, I always think the ship, which we know nothing about, is a ship that we're all on. And that we all have that kind of sense that if you don't kind of, I don't know, pull together on the ship, if you don't kind of encourage togetherness, then the kind of the ship that we're on kind of sinks in a sense. My message though, my third message, is very much about togetherness. And that what Jared's book also has done is that it's actually brought all of you together. And you're here because of your love of Dunamore. So very much my third message is, long may you have events like this that bring people together. Whether it's Jared's book or something else, but we need, in the world that we live in today, and we don't live in the past. And I'd love to go back in the time machine and meet all the people in Jared's books. We don't live in the past, but we can learn from the past. We can learn messages from the past and kind of move forward to the future. We can learn from the sense of place, identity, and so on. But togetherness matters. And so long may local history, and long may our love of kind of place bring us together. And that's my third message. So my dear friends, stories matter and emotions matter. They can impress, disturb, make you curious, explore, and so on. The methodology that Jared has kind of put together encourages us even more to do more research. If there's more to all of this that we're researching that meets the eye. And the third thing is, like, long may events like this kind of bring us together. So I am so delighted, and I know you're so proud, knowing Jared very, very well. I've only met Jared in the last kind of 2 weeks, but I can formally launch Jared's book here this evening. And long may it be a book or a tome that people are going to open and kind of find nuggets of information, be curious about, take it out into the field, but very much celebrate the different stories and the different events within this book. Jared, thank you so much for being you.
George Ford, somewhere there in the Good man.
should call Shibog Shibur as a bit of the mountain road after that. Thank you very much.
Jordan Ford disappeared again. Right. Jordan will introduce the more people and then
We good to go?
sorry?
Yep.
Okay. And then we will have Jordan Ford and himself say a few words to conclude the night. But there may be a surprise at the end of the night we don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, John. The long-promised Home Rule for Ireland was facing bitter resistance from Unionists who formed the Ulster Volunteer Force, an armed militia in opposition to the upcoming Home Rule Act of Parliament. The Volunteers then were formed in opposition to the UVF. Matt Healy has been the cornerstone of remembrance and oral history here in Donaghmore for generations. Matt, your father Dan got involved very early on and became a very active member of the local Volunteers IRA.
Matt Healy here, my father Dan, member of Corbrack Company's Farm, been from Corbrack, Fairmont, Donaghmore, Craw North. 23 of them men marched in Limerick 1915, led by Thomas McCurtain and Terence McSweeney. This is very well documented now in Murray's book, Corbrack All Members. They walked over a Granda train in Randolph and marched in Limerick in 1914 under Terence McSweeney and Thomas McCurtain. This is the same chain now as they wore the same chain as the Lord Mayor of the tonight. And there was another man, he was a member of C Company, 6th Battalion, Cork No. 1 Brigade. He had 6.5 years service with the IRA through the War of Independence and the Civil War. And there was, he never came back for him living now in 1927. There was 3 more brothers involved, Michael Healy and his name are on the stone below in Corbrack Church, and two sisters then, members of Cumnaman. They took dispatches all often into the Wallace's sisters. They were all, the whole family were involved. 2 uncles and an aunt then went to America 1922. There was 35,000 anti-tree women that went to America, and most of anyone who hardly ever returned anymore. No jobs, no work, no nothing. But in his witness statement is all there in Jotter's book that for anyone to read now. And special prayers for the people, the safe houses, the people that fed them and kept them on the run. They had no barracks, no pay. These are all volunteers. And I'm very happy today that we still have volunteers in this parish. Just proving here tonight, the crowd that turned up for Judge's book tonight. So very good prayers to Judge for all the information he's ever given the local people. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Matt. Your family, very proud tradition, all explained there. Thank you, Matt. So now, Frank Bustede was the officer commanding the active service unit at Dripsy Ambush. Brian O'Donoghue is the grandson of Frank Bustede, and I'm sure, Brian, you could talk all night about your grandfather's exploits. Could you mention 1 or 2 incidents of note that he was involved in, if you can, please?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank Gerard O'Rourke for inviting me here to say a few words tonight and to congratulate him on his book. It's a huge book, and I'm looking forward very much to reading it. And from the little bits that I have just had a look at, I think it gives an excellent background, the land war to the Civil War, for why this area was so deeply involved and, you know, stood out, really. My grandfather, Frank Bustede, was later into the movement in this area. He was brought up in Blarney, but he was very much involved here and spent a lot of time in Donaghmore, a lot of it on the run, and stayed in a number of houses around here that I was lucky enough to be brought around to see a couple of years ago. One of the stories, or the short pieces that I'll tell you about, was involving a house originally belonged to an Owen O'Sullivan. It was in Pluckans, Curra, Donaghmore, and I was up there to see that house a few years ago, as I said, and saw the room where the volunteers used to be kept. It was one of the safe houses. That particular house, Owen O'Sullivan, his grandfather was also Owen O'Sullivan. Apparently, it's not in documented history, but it is something that I, by the way, have done a biography of my grandfather. It's in the Blarney Historical Journal of 2022, the Decade of Centenaries. It's a biographical article, and I'm working still on a bigger book version, and this piece of information I put into it. Owen told me that his father Joe told him that he overheard his grandfather Owen planning with my grandfather Frank Bustede one of the, what will I say, they were attempting to get the volunteers who had been captured at Dripsey back. They had made a number of attempts directly. They brought a letter to the Victoria Barracks. There had been many appeals by prominent citizens to save the volunteers who were, you know, facing military court-martial and death. And as everybody knows here, Mary Lindsay and her driver James Clark had been taken captive in lieu of that, hoping to exchange them. But one thing that isn't widely known is that, this is what I was told, was that Lieutenant Colonel Gareth Evans, who was in charge of the Manchester Regiment and a friend of Mary Lindsay's, contacted the IRA, and it was arranged that he would meet them. And Owen's grandfather apparently and Frank were planning it this night when Owen's father Joe overheard it. And that was just a little bit of information, and they went to the cottage where Lindsay and Clark were being kept, and there met Gareth Evans. But unfortunately, it didn't work out again because General Strickland and Macready did not want to do business. Even though, if you think about it, the 100th anniversary of the Dripsey ambush, the oration that day in October 21, it was October because of COVID, it should have been February, Dr. Gabriel Doherty of UCC said that the British Army in 1920, the head of the British Army in Ireland, had stated that the IRA were an army, that's very important, and that the were an army, and that the Troubles, as they were called, was a war. So in fact, now these records weren't released until a long, long time later, but this is now to be read by anybody. So that is really saying that the volunteers that were taken captive in Dripsey should have been afforded political prisoner status and not executed, so by military court-martial. He also said that Mrs. Lindsay, for whatever her motivations were, acted as a spy, and, you know, Florrie O'Donoghue had also said that after the original event, and that the two officers involved, Jackie O'Leary, who was the commandant of the 6th Battalion at that time, and Frank, who was the vice-commandant, acted correctly in military code law. So that's just something to state. The second thing I'm going to mention, I could talk all night, as Gerard said, is kind of an amusing story, and that is to do with two ladies from the 6th Battalion area who were very big supporters, and their house was also a safe house. One of their sons, who's passed away sadly since, Bertie Murphy, told me the story, and it was about his mother Ellen, who was mentioned in the book, Ellen Downey, and her sister, whose name I can't quite remember. They had a brother as well who was very involved, but like, I think, was it Con mentioned there, or Matt mentioned there, he went away off to America afterwards and never came back like so many. My grandfather also did, but came back. Ellen anyway and her sister were very, very involved, and but they weren't happy with but they weren't happy with the work they were doing. They wanted to do more. So she nagged apparently Frank and Jackie O'Leary and whoever else in their local company area to train them into how to use rifles. And they did. And one of them, I'm not sure was it Ellen or her sister, they still weren't happy. And she wanted to learn how to make bombs. And he said to me he suspected there had been, that she had started a small bomb factory somewhere on the farm. There was some kind of a dugout. That's what he said. Just so I share that with you. Is that you heard that? Well, there you go. Frank was went to America afterwards and had a business with another volunteer from Blarney, Dan Horgan, and I was great friends with also Joe Murphy, who was also in the States, and they all returned. Anyway, I don't want to take up too much more time. I just want to congratulate Gerard again on his book, and I'm very much looking forward to reading it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. And now, lastly, from the floor, we might have a few comments from John Ireland, the famous Examiner in NACO reporter who likes to listen to and to tell a few stories. And you're very welcome here, John.
Yeah. Thanks very much for the invitation. It was one of those occasions when Gerard asked me some weeks ago to come. I said I probably would. And then discovered that three of my club mates were playing a Munster final in Limerick tonight, but I said, fair play, Gerard was after asking me before the Munster final was on, so this is my second time being here at one of Gerard's book launches. I was here obviously when he launched Sweet Dunamore a few years ago, and it was a magnificent book. I thought it was a magnificent book, and I know often things I'd be writing in the echo there, I suppose I'd often take little stories from could be from Dunamore or Blarney or something, and I might use them in the middle of my writing. I don't always give credit, but in sure I don't know when I got the stories here, so it doesn't really matter. But he sent me a PDF, which is kind of a computer yoke, which I'm not great about, but I got the chance of reading it there, most of it, in the last few weeks, and look, all I can say, it's just a wonderful book. Lord Mayor mentioned the different emotions, and I was just thinking, like, the emotion of the bitterness that happened during the Civil War, especially. It was terrible, and it comes out in this book. But like one of the things that I was thinking afterwards is, how did that bitterness, how did it get solved, and how did it get salved? And yet here we are now, over 100 years later, and things like sport and the J and ladies football and Macra and all those things had a huge bearing in country life in bringing the people of places like this together. A friend of mine came with me tonight, Robert Barry from Bartlemy. His father would be a third cousin of Gerard's late wife, Trish, actually. And I was just thinking, we're coming down, I'd said to Robert, like, my family wouldn't have been strong politically, and yet the Arnolds would always be, they were blue shirts. And Robert Barry's family, they were always regarded as Republicans. And yet we're great friends. Our families have been great friends down the years. We might vote different. We might still have different political views. But that's the great thing about it, I suppose, especially in country places. You can have different views and you can still, work together as a community. And what we have here in Dunamore is a wonderful community. I know a lot of the people here. And Gerard's book and the way he's brought out the bitterness and how we got over it and how we walked through it and how generations have walked through it came out it came out amazingly in this book, and it just struck me, and it's just a wonderful work. And it's a tribute to him. I don't know when I met him first, but we communicated about 4 years ago, and I'm just glad that he's a friend of mine, and I'm glad that he's still working and researching. And this is a book. When you were talking there a while ago, is there any other parish? No, there isn't any other parish. There isn't any other parish, because I collect history books, and I've written a few small books myself, and with about 40 years I'm going to write a book like this, but I haven't got around to writing it yet. So credit to Gerard, and myself and Robert are just delighted to be here tonight, and well done, Gerard, and I hope, and I know that it will be a bestseller, because a book like this should find its way into every home, not in this parish, but all over rural Ireland and all over rural Cork. Thanks, John.
Thank you very much, John. So now it's back to you, John, on the stage.
So, course, I'm calling Gerald O'Rourke, the Master of the Ceremonies, to give us 2 words. Thank you, Gerald.
Just put up your hand at the back there if you can't hear me. Lord Mayor, Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Michael Looney, Deputising for the County Mayor, people of Dunamore, ladies and gentlemen, you are all very welcome here tonight for the launch of my book, Landwater Civil War 1900-1924, Dunamore to Cork and Beyond. I am indeed very humbled and delighted that you took the time to celebrate this occasion with me and my family. I want to mention a good friend of mine, Jed O'Connor, who has come here tonight from near Phoenix in County Kerry. And I can tell you he is not one bit intimidated to be among so many Corkmen and Corkwomen. I also want to especially welcome my daughter Ciara's in-laws, Terry and Don from Portsmouth. This book takes us through one of the most turbulent periods in Irish history. Cork at the turn of the century was very much part of the British Empire, and when King Edward visited Cork in 1903, it was not rebel flags that flew in the city, but Union Jack flags. Gradually, a reawakening of Irish nationalism, notably the emergence of the GAA, Gaelic League, and a literary revival, energised and transformed the Irish people. National independence was driven by a constitutional process, with Irish MPs fighting the cause in the British Houses of Parliament. The 1903 Land Act afforded small tenant farmers an opportunity to purchase their own holdings, while the Labourers Act provided labourers with improved habitation from their existing hovels. It was also a period of dissension and infighting amongst various political groups, with the Irish Parliamentary Party the butt of criticism. Their constitutional strategy of seeking independence was becoming outdated for many of the separatist movements. A feature of the time were hotly contested elections, which were ferociously canvassed. Rallies were attended by vast crowds, with travelling contingents going to various parts of the Mid-Cork area, accompanied by local bands. Results were celebrated passionately, with victory parades, men carrying pikes with lighted turf, sods, and unashamed delirious shouting and taunting. So for today's councillors, which we have here in my background, who are facing an upcoming election, they will appreciate that they are very fortunate in working in what we can call a more subdued environment. With the First World War interrupted, a long-awaited Home Rule Bill, the emergence of the Ulster Volunteers and the resulting formation of the Irish Volunteers brought a potentially dangerous situation to the island of Ireland. What followed was the Easter Rising and the subsequent execution of its leaders. This brought a huge outpouring of national grievance, reflecting in much opposition to British rule, leading to the War of Independence. The Volunteers of Dunamore and Cork seem to have a renewed focus in determining their own and their families' fortunes. On this occasion, they were not going to be reminded of their non-contribution to a failed Easter Rising and immersed themselves in the war. Many of those families suffered greatly for their input, enduring bereavements and economic distress. There is always an amusing story amid all the mayhem. One particular one concerns the Easter Rising in Dublin, when a certain zealous priest, having heard of wholesale thieving in the city centre, decided to attempt to stop the looting. He met a boy who was bent down with the weight of some 20 pairs of boots. Having asked the boy where he had got the boots, the youngster looked over his shoulder and, conscious that he need that he needed to hurry on, answered, "In Tyler's, father, but you'll have to hurry up or they'll be all gone." Meanwhile, Irish soldiers who fought for the Allies, and recruited by Britain in the First World War, did so in most cases to survive. Living in poor conditions and with no prospect of improving their prospects, they faced a difficult decision. When they returned to Ireland, they faced resentment and were ostracised from society. Many years later, this was reflected on by a more passionate and considered viewpoint, most notably from former Taoiseach Sean Lemass. During the War of Independence, Dunamore and the Greater District became international news with the executions of Mrs. Lindsay, Major Compton Smith, and the aftermath of the Dripsey ambush, when 5 volunteers were executed and 1 died from wounds received. These fatalities were debated on the floor of the British Parliament and became headlines across the international press. Meanwhile, over in Manchester, Mary Healy, a little-known girl from this parish, became one of the leading women in the IRA, helping De Valera not alone to escape from Lincoln Jail, but shielding him in her own house for a week thereafter. She accompanied Dev on his evening walks in a manner that depicted them as a happy couple and never arousing suspicion. The tremendous contribution of women to the war is epitomised by the Wallace sisters from Kilcurran, who from humble beginnings on an evicted farm in Kilcurran fronted a little stationery shop near St. Augustine's Church in Cork that concealed what was the official headquarters of the Cork No. 1 IRA Brigade. And again, I am delighted to see their niece Bernadette Wallace here tonight and grandnephew Ted Murphy. Many safe houses were instrumental in helping the weary volunteers continue the fight. But spies and informers were always a danger, and day-to-day living became a constant source of stress. The resulting civil war was a complete disaster, with brother against brother, and resulted in many years of what could only be described as an atmosphere of venom and toxicity. In a complete transformation, the heroes of the War of Independence were vilified and became the subject of animosity. The execution of William Healy from Lochabaw in Dunamore was a low point. He was the last prisoner to be executed in Cork Jail. The subsequent struggle of many volunteers in applying for pensions and the immigration of other volunteers led to an enhancement of discontentment and resentment. A reluctance by survivors of the Civil War to reflect and relate their stories contributed to an air of uncertainty and inaccurate portrayals. Happily, with more records becoming available, the picture becomes clearer, and a more informed analysis can be reflected on. 100 years later, who would have thought that these Civil War parties would now be at one, forming a government and guiding the state? The question obviously arises, then what would the Civil War veterans think of it all? This night is bittersweet as we are missing one very dear person, my wife Tricia. She was an inspiration for this production and wanted it to be published. And it is fitting that it is now a tribute and legacy to her memory. €15 of each copy sold will be donated to cancer care services in Cork. And this is a legacy to her kindness and concern for other people. It is somewhat ironic when one reflects that this book about war and suffering is now a catalyst for promoting healing. I would respectfully ask you to encourage your families, friends and connections at home and abroad to buy this book, and this will achieve a significant sum for such cancer services. The power of social media and direct contact was brought home to me just yesterday when a family member asked me to hold 20 books after posting details to a WhatsApp group. Many of you have been affected directly and indirectly in some way with this dreaded illness and have availed of the wonderful services out there. But unfortunately, they need money to continue that great work. I would hope in some small way through you, the public, to help that cause. I wish to thank the Lord Mayor, Councillor Kieran McCarthy, for his kind attendance here tonight in his very demanding schedule. He is a gifted and passionate historian and a prolific author who has enhanced his native city's historical profile and contributed enormously to the ordinary people's awareness of their environment and their family history. Also to Councillor Michael Looney, Deputising for the County Mayor, for his kind words and who is seeking to represent this area for the next 5 years. Best wishes also go to the other councillors in this area. I am deeply obliged to my close historical colleague and MC for the night, John O'Connell, whose historical knowledge and enthusiasm for his native parish is and remains an inspiration to present and aspiring historians. Gerald Ford, in his roving reporter discussions, has performed his duties admirably in what were fascinating insights to various aspects of local history. As stated, he published a book, The Bridges of Dunamore, during the pandemic, and this is a very worthy addition to the history of the parish. Thanks to Mary Wallace and the Community Council for use of the hall, Audrey Crowley and the Catering Committee, Tim Healy, our singer, who came from West Cork, and is the son of Dan Healy, who was featured in the book. Tim McCoy for video, John Manning for parking, our booksellers Lehman, Maureen Lynch and Stephen Bruchett, photographer Paul Tips, the many media outlets and kind people who promoted the book and will hopefully continue to do so. Also my son Gerard, who though unable to be here, being resident in Vancouver, updated the book website www.dunamore.ie, which for many immigrants and those of Dunamore and Cork origins affords them the resource to purchase the book. Thank you to all the participating interviewees tonight who gave such great stories to the audience. I hope you enjoyed the book, which is now the top book in a trilogy of work centred on the parish of Dunamore. Above all, I wish to thank my family, Trish's family, and the many kind people who reassured me, motivated me, and have provided support and comfort in what has been an emotional roller coaster. And before you leave tonight, please avail of some light refreshments at the back of the hall. The ladies have been busy all evening, and enjoy the conversation. And maybe before you do that, as Gabe Bodden used to say in the Late Late Show, perhaps we can prevail on the Lord Mayor to give us a rendering of a cock song to close the show.
My dear friends, 10 years, 15 years after the War of Independence and Civil War, the world needed more healing. And a tune was produced by a very famous Hollywood actor, Charlie Chaplin. And he wrote a film called Modern Times, and he put this tune in, and over time the words are added to this. This isn't the Cork song, but I always like to think that somewhere in the heart of the Savoy, in the Pavilion Cinema in the middle of the 1930s, that they sang this song, and it probably is as prevalent today as it was way back in the 1930s. And I'm dedicating this to Gerard. Smile, even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by. If you smile through your fears and sorrow, smile and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through. For you, light up your face with gladness, hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying?